So we're moving into now really into sort of changes that have been taking place within the Pearce group, through this period of transition from traditional to collaborative. So could you say a little bit more about what have been the implications in terms of, of changes within the Pearce organisation? What did you have to do? How did you respond to the changing market conditions?
Well, when I first got there, the family were running the business. Then Crest bought Pearce in 1985, and one of the first things that Crest said we needed to do was form into teams. But in those days, the teams were based around the contract form. So you had a team that looked at doing traditional contracting, a team looking at design and build, which was still quite new in 85. And Pearce were quite innovative in having quite a large architectural department. At one point, we had the biggest group of architects in Bristol. So we were set up around the form of contract. But by the time the Egan and Latham agenda were being talked about, we realised that we shouldn't be organised in that way. It should be organised around customers. So we changed the business to be looking at different sectors. So we had a business that looked at the leisure sector, and we're in a framework with Whitbread, and there was another business that looked at the retail sector, which was started by the framework we got into with Asda. We had another business that looked at semiconductors, particularly because at that time there was a market that was very, very rapidly expanding. So we were into building factories for silicon chips and computer chips. So it's sector focused rather than contractual type focused. And that way we started to get expertise. And although we didn't know it then, the jargon that we now use to describe it is product families.
Right. Okay.
Because to build a series of hotels for Whitbread is a different set of technology, different set of problems to solve than refurbishing supermarkets in the middle of the night.
Sure.
To keep the likes of Sainsbury's and Asda happy.
So can I just come around that again a little bit, just to make sure we're absolutely clear on that. So you're saying that the increased customer focus that was part of the market situation that you were in influenced your structure.
Yes.
You changed your structure to reflect your customer base. Yes. And you started assembling people around expertise, around those particular clients and product ranges and so on. And that allowed you to introduce a degree of specialisation within your organisation?
Yes. When we first divided the company up in that way, a number of people said, does that mean I'll be building supermarkets for the rest of my life? And some people reacted badly to that, said, I want the variety, I like the idea of working for a general contractor, I don't know, I'll be doing different parts. Other people actually liked the security of knowing that once they got good at something, they could apply that knowledge to the next job. They'd solved the problem once, they got to the next job, they tended to be working with the same subcontractors, the same architects, because we're all part of the framework. You don't need to solve it again. You can refine the process. And other people get a buzz out of seeing things get better. And over the time that we worked with Asda, we started off building new build supermarkets in about 42, 45 weeks. And it was costing then, we're talking about 1995, 96, it was costing about 12 million to build a supermarket. 10 years on, we're now talking about 20 weeks. We have gone down as quick as 14 weeks, but decided that the cost actually went up. So to get the quality right and not to actually pay extra for speed, we're down to 20 weeks for a complete new build. A fit out of a store is about 8 weeks from the shell building. So depending on how complicated the shell is, you can fit one out in 8 weeks now.
So you've been kind of hitting the Latham Egan targets which were set in the 1990s for the industry.
That sort of reduction, yes. And also with the cost now, today, 10 years later, is 9 million as opposed to 12.
Absolutely, with the current inflation in cost of materials and so on.
That's right. But the buildings we're building are totally different to the ones we were building 10 years ago. They're not designed by just an architect sitting alone deciding what a store should look like. We're actually being designed by a supply chain that are saying, here's a roofing product that is actually the most efficient. Can we have the building to suit this product? Right. Do we need brickwork necessarily down to 2 meters high, because that's what we did before? Can we bring the cladding down to the ground in areas where it's of no benefit to have brickwork? There's things like that. The technology is actually being modified to suit the most value, the best value solution.
So very much along the sort of Latham concept
Yes.
of teamwork and involving people early in the process, making those key decisions right at the beginning of the project.
And things have gone the other way as well in many respects, that some of the standards have gone up. For instance, when we were fairly early on into building these supermarkets on a regular basis, Asda realised they were spending about £2.5 million a year repairing terrazzo floors that were about a year to 18 months old. Mm. So they actually did a study. We did a study with them as contractors, designers, structural engineers to find out what was causing these failures. And we were realising that the quality and the standards of setting out of movement joints between structural elements and finishing elements just wasn't accurate enough. And so cracks were actually coming up through the structure and were missing the movement joints in the terrazzo and were leading to lines of cracking across the store, leading to repairs. So they actually wrote a complete new standard, quality standard, for how accurately you need to set things out, and we actually set out the building now based on the terrazzo. Right. We work back to say where the structural joint should be to suit the layout of the floor tiles.
Sure. So it's taking a more holistic view of the product and the process, which you can't really do within the traditional.
No, because all that work is done offline. Sure. It's done between projects. It's not done in the project. When you're in a project and you're trying to build something in 20 weeks, all your effort is on getting that building built. It's between the projects that someone says, we've got a problem, can you come and help us sort it out? And if you're in a framework and you're getting, at the height we were getting £40 million worth of work from Asda every year, that's a lot of repeat work that you're not having to tender for. So rather than spend the money on estimators and marketeers going out looking for the project, we were involved in continuous improvement groups looking at these type of issues and saying, what can we do to solve this problem? What is the right solution for the ventilation system, for instance, in the store? So working with services engineers.
So that's all really great stuff, Andrew. But let's come back a little bit again to the Pearce perspective, because clearly there are advantages for you, and in this case the client Asda in working in this particular way. But does this not mean that, because presumably you're still doing work procured in the old ways?
Yes.
So does that mean you're kind of having to run almost two sort of organisations?
We are. We have a business which is culturally divided, virtually 50-50, between people who are working predominantly for the retailers in that type of collaborative framework, go anywhere in the country, follow your customer, work nights, work Sundays if that's what is needed. There's one group of people that work like that, and there's another group of people that are much more locally based, work within an hour and a half of Bristol, and work on a variety of projects as they appear. Although we are trying to specialise in two streams. One's education, because of so much money being spent by the government replacing schools. So we're building up an expertise in primary schools, secondary schools, and further education colleges. And the other area that we've focused on, probably because of our history of building big industrial buildings, which Pearce had a reputation for in the 1980s, and designing them, we've moved into manufacturing facilities. So building things for people like Gerber Foods, which we did a job in Bridgewater last few years. £50 million worth of juice production is claimed by them to be the most efficient juice packaging production facility in the world, bar none. They're big buildings that have complex M&E in them, that we try to become more specialised in those areas.
But can you, putting it is simply, can you actually see the join within the Pearce?
Yes, you can. You actually.
And does that present you particular problems?
In some respects it does, in other respects it doesn't. We all use the same basic systems, we follow the same processes, we all tie into the same technology in terms of IT, information technology, but within the actual teams they have a cultural, tribal type of difference that is quite marked. People who work very closely with their customers, their retail customers, almost see the retail customer as their employer rather than Pearce.
Right.
They're so tied into Tesco's or Sainsbury's and what they want, they will do what Sainsbury's want sometimes more than what Pearce are asking them to do. So it's that they've moved into...
So you see assets, including your people, and maybe parts of your building, I suppose, as well, which are dedicated to that particular
Yes,
client.
we have not only restructured in terms of teams, but we've actually put those teams together. And we've given them their own area in the building to say...
So if I was to walk into your head office, I would know which group of, which client each group of your employees works on.
I mean, Tesco's is our biggest single framework contractor, doing about 45 to 50 million a year with them. And there's an area, if you walk into their area of the building, there is Tesco posters on the wall, there are rewards, their literature is plastered everywhere. Right. So it's, yes, those people are very much in that cultural.